Welcome to part 4 of our 4-part series on bovine fetal gender determination. This installment features a self-test that will allow you to check up on how much you've learned from the previous 3. As a quick recap, we're looking for the genital tubercle in these bovine fetuses. The GT is found under the tail head in the female and caudal to the umbilicus on the ventral abdomen of the male. The corresponding ultrasound image will feature a hyperechoic or bright white echo where the dense tissue of the GT is found. At the very caudal aspect of the fetal body and adjacent to the tail in the female, and caudal and adjacent to the thicker umbilicus on the ventral abdominal wall of the male. Remember that the umbilicus has a strip of bacon-like appearance in longitudinal section and is reminiscent of a chocolate chip cookie in cross-section thanks to the large black vessels running through it. This structure is a major landmark for locating the male GT and obtaining a negative female identification. The following 25 images show fetuses of varying gestational ages, positions, and scanning planes, and were obtained with a variety of EI medical equipment, different model and ages of ultrasounds and transducers, with older or newer settings and software versions. Some will be simpler and prettier than others, but they all represent the type of images that you might see on various ultrasounds in the field. Each video clip will play through multiple times. Note that they are of varying lengths, so this will take a different amount of time for each image. Write down your answers to self-test. The correct gender identification will be revealed once the loop has finished. Number 1. Number 1. We're starting out with an easy one. This is a 58-day pregnancy in the frontal plane. The video clip was taken from a very modern system with fetal sexing settings applied, producing a lovely image. We can clearly see the cross-section of the umbilicus with the bright white male GT just caudal to it. We can also see a cross-section through the 4 limbs and tail and the amnion encircling the fetus. This is a bull calf. Number 2. Number 2. This fetus is also seen in the frontal plane. It's a bit further along in gestation with more skeletal development, but it also appears larger because the ultrasound is set at a shallower depth, magnifying the view. This is a good example of an image where the dense fetal bone of the tail could be mistaken for a female GT. But if you fan through the fetus repeatedly, it's clear that there's no distinct structure at the back end, and that the male GT is very obvious on the ventral abdomen adjacent to the umbilicus. This is a bull calf. Number 3. Number 3. This pregnancy is a little less advanced at 55 days. There is less fetal skeleton evident, and while it is a diagnostic age for gender determination, the GT may still have a little further migration to do, which illustrates that sexing is a little bit easier to do closer to 60 days. Making this one a tad trickier, the fetus appears to be a little more curled up, with the pelvis tucked in and the tail between the hind legs. However, by slowing down and scrubbing through, we can see that the GT has moved toward the hind end and is separated from the umbilicus and near the tail. This is a heifer calf. Number 4. Number 4. This image is very different. It was recorded on older equipment with less resolution, and the fetus is much further along, probably 100 days or more. It's also seen in the transverse plane, so we're seeing a cross-section of the fetal abdomen. Fanning toward the head, the umbilicus comes into view, with no male GT seen. As we come back toward the hind end, the vertebrae within the tail obscure the area of interest to some degree, but a female GT, which at this stage is much more fleshy and less dense, is visible. This is a heifer calf. Number 5. Number 5. Here's another fetus in the 60 to 65 day window. The clip starts out with the calf in a sagittal view, but it rolls onto its side and we obtain a nice frontal plane. This one also has the tail tucked between the hind legs, but by fanning out of the plane where most of the tail lies, we get a nice view of the ventral abdomen and see the male GT adjacent to the umbilicus. This is a bull calf. Number 6. Number 6. Here's another old, lower resolution image, but fortunately this one is positioned well and in an age range that allows for good visualization of a very distinct female GT under the tail. This is a heifer calf. Number 7. This is a great transverse view of a 69-day fetus. Remember that the tricky part of identifying the gender in this view is that the structures can be very isolated. We move forward on the fetus to image the umbilicus, and it comes into view without having first seen a male GT. When we return to the tail end, the female GT is visible, although less convincing in this view. Confidence is gained by that absence of a male GT. This is a heifer calf. Number 8. Number 8. Are these starting to get easier? This is a well-developed fetus, likely in the 75-day range. It has distinct skeletal and abdominal structures, and the male GT is readily apparent. This is a bull calf. Number 9. Number 9. This pregnancy is 120 days. This is a stage of gestation where your success in reaching the fetus, having the right fetal positioning, and having equipment that can penetrate well enough to visualize the necessary anatomy can mean the difference between getting a diagnosis or not. In this clip, the operator is taking a nice tour along the fetal body, looking at the abdominal organs, and the beating heart, and even a nice view of the eye where the lens can be seen. The gender diagnosis is made right at the very beginning of the loop. Here we're able to see a female GT to the left, with the muscle of the hind limbs seen branching out to the right. This is a heifer calf. Number 10. Number 10. This is a gorgeous image of an 80-day pregnancy in transverse section. We have a great view of the umbilicus entering the abdominal wall and the absence of a male GT. At the end of the clip, we see two distinct hind limbs, a tail, and the female GT. This is a heifer calf. Number 11. Number 11. Does this look familiar? It's very similar to the last one. It's a 74-day pregnancy with outstanding detail. In this example, there is a male GT adjacent to the umbilicus. Because it's in a transverse plane, we have to actively fan back and forth over this area to see one and then the other structure next to each other. The GT is finite in length and more hyperechoic, and the umbilicus has its classic appearance with the vessels clearly seen. In this particular clip, we can also appreciate the developing scrotum situated between the hind limbs. Once again, care has to be taken not to mistake the tail for a female GT. This is a great example of why you need that negative and positive ID. If you had only looked at the hind end, you may have convinced yourself of the wrong conclusion. This is a bull calf. Number 12. Number 12. This should be a pretty simple one. It's a 64-day pregnancy in the transverse plane. The video clip starts at the hind end of the fetus, where we'd see a distinct tail, female GT, and two hind limbs. We then move forward to inspect the umbilical region and confirm that there's no male GT present. This is a heifer calf. Number 13. Number 13. This older image is not the clearest, so you have to have your bearings. The clip shows the hind end of the fetus in transverse section, with the hind legs pointing to the left. This is a little bit of a trick question because the image never explores the umbilical region. However, the female GT is bright and apparent under the tail if you know where to look. This is a heifer calf. Number 14. Number 14. Here's a later fetus in the frontal plane. As we pass the umbilicus, there's no male GT seen. Under the tail and between the hindquarters, we see a distinct female GT. This is a heifer calf. Number 15. Number 15. This one should be a nice confidence boost. It's a beautiful image of a 97-day pregnancy in transverse section. Step 1. No male GT seen. Step 2. Very clear female GT, tail, and hind limbs. This is a heifer calf. Number 16. Number 16. This image has a bit of a unique perspective. It's mostly in the frontal plane, although the hind limbs are somewhat out behind the fetal body. We start by seeing a scrotum between the hind limbs. And then as we move toward the head, we fan away from the body and see a cross-section of the male GT and the umbilicus sitting side by side. This is a bull calf. Number 17. Number 17. We're back to a younger pregnancy at 55 days, the earliest end of the gender determination window. This little one is pretty active, but as we scrub through the image, you'll see that the GT has moved cranially and found itself near the umbilicus. This is a bull calf. Number 18. Number 18. This 68-day fetus is super wiggly, but thanks to the lovely resolution and the clear frontal view, we can see a distinct male GT adjacent to the umbilicus. This is a bull calf. Number 19. Number 19. This is a more advanced pregnancy, probably around 120 days. The first thing we identify in this image is the scrotum between the hind limbs. As we approach the mid-ventral abdomen, we see the umbilicus and the male GT in the seam region. With some creative angling, the operator is able to position both within the screen at the same time. Once again, the umbilicus has its characteristic appearance, and the male GT is more echogenic, with a finite length. This is a bull calf. Number 20. Number 20. Here's another nice 65-day frontal example. You can probably tell by now that this is a really ideal gestational age and fetal position. As we move back to the tail end, we identify the female GT in the cleavage of the hindquarters. This is a heifer calf. Number 21. Number 21. Hopefully you're getting more comfortable with getting oriented in a transverse view. In this example, we're able to see the umbilicus and the male GT situated adjacent to each other on the ventral abdomen. This is a bull calf. Number 22. Number 22. This image gives you the answer right from the beginning with a very obvious female GT. Just to be sure, we scan forward toward the head to image the umbilicus and confirm the lack of a male GT. This is a heifer calf. Number 23. Number 23. Here's another more advanced stage transverse view. Starting at the skull and scrolling back, we first identify the umbilicus and then the male GT. As we reach the back end, we can see a well-developed scrotum and an obvious lack of female genitalia. This is a bull calf. Number 24. Number 24. We take our time getting to the back end of this one, but when we do, we see a very nice, distinct female GT and tail. This is a heifer calf. Number 25. For number 25, this clip is a little bit of a joke, as we don't actually see the male or female GT. But it illustrates that once you know your orientation on the fetus, you'll have a much easier time making sense of what you see. Based on the development of this scrotal sac, I think you'll agree that this is a bull calf. Once again, many thanks to Dr. Sandy Curran for the majority and the best of these images. I hope this series has been helpful. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channels and social media so that you're notified of all of our upcoming educational materials.